I had been married to my childhood friend for 3 years when I stumbled upon a post he had written long ago. In it, he poured his heart out, recounting how he and the girl he truly loved had been forced apart, how, in the end, he ended up marrying the girl next door instead. I was that girl. The one next door. The girl who unknowingly stepped into the middle of someone else's love story. That realization didn't hit me like a thunderclap. It crept in slowly, quietly, until it screamed. It all started the day I went to Joshua's company to surprise him. The elevator doors opened to utter chaos, screaming, banging, voices raised in raw emotion. Joshua's mother was hysterical, something I had never seen before. A woman always so composed, now trembling with rage. "Joshua is married," she yelled. "Why are you here? Your mother already stole Josue's father. Now you want to steal my son too." In the middle of it all stood Joshua, shielding a woman in his arms as if she were a treasure he couldn't afford to lose. I froze, unable to speak. I wanted to scream his name Jobit before I could. Someone shoved me. My arms slammed into the edge of a table, and the pain ripped a cry from my throat. Joshua looked at me then. Panic flared in his eyes. He gently pushed the woman away, instinctively stepping toward me. But just as quickly, he turned back, shielding her again when his mother hurled a heavy flower pot. It crashed down on his head. Blood spilled across his forehead, and everything descended into chaos. I heard the woman sobbing, "Are you okay, Joshua?" and his soft, barely there voice replying, "I'm fine. It's nothing." Then he collapsed. At the hospital, just before they wheeled him into the ER, he gripped my hand and whispered, "Sarah." Then he was gone. Daniel, one of Joshua's closest friends, met me at the hospital room later that evening. He tried to speak, but I grabbed his wrist and pulled him back. The door to Joshua's room was slightly open, and I could hear everything inside. A woman's voice, delicate and sweet, coaxed him gently. "Come on, just one more bite. I made this for you." "Lena, it's okay," Joshua replied wearily. But the girl's eyes welled with tears. "You hurt yourself because of me. Can't I worry about you? Don't we love each other?" There was a pause. Then the sound of movement rustling fabric, a quiet embrace. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence lovers fall into. Daniel whispered behind me, "Sister-in-law." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I wiped them away quickly and muttered, "How embarrassing." I turned and walked away. 3 years ago, I came back home after finishing my studies abroad. My parents had organized a welcome dinner, and Joshua offered to pick me up. We hadn't seen each other in 3 years. The tension in the car was thick, polite small talk, stolen glances. I had loved him for so long, and yet, being alone with him felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. When we arrived, my seatbelt jammed. Joshua leaned over to help. His scent-soft sandalwood brushed against me. My body went rigid. He looked at me and gently ran a hand through my hair.
"It's been so long," he said.
"You feel so distant. Didn't you say, when we were kids, you wanted to marry me?" I blushed so hard, I felt lightheaded. That night, under the glow of party lights, he appeared with a bouquet and confessed in front of our parents. "I've waited 10 years for this, Sarah." My heart exploded. I thought I was the happiest person in the world. Life after marriage was sweet. Joshua took care of me like no one ever had. Brown sugar water when I had cramps, flu medicine when I was sick, tiny thoughtful gestures every single day. I told myself I had to be good to him too. He loved me. Or so I believed. Until I read the post. A confession. A heartbreak disguised as truth. I fell in love with my dad's mistress's daughter. What do? She's adorable, like a little girl, always hugging me, telling me she wants to be with me forever. But my mom found out. She threatened to take her own life if I didn't break it off. I can't hurt my mom, but I can't bear to lose her either. My heart is torn apart. The comments below were split. Some cursed him, some sympathized. But I just stared at the screen, numb. Then came the part that crushed me. My mom's pushing me to get married. She says the girl next door is back from studying abroad. She likes her. Says I should marry her. I agreed. That was me. I was the solution to his heartbreak. The compromise he made. The escape he chose. And I, blindly, lovingly, said yes. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror as Aunt Sun clasped another delicate bracelet around her wrist, her eyes gentle and proud as if presenting her daughter-in-law to the world. You're truly glowing today, she said, her smile as soft as silk. Sarah responded with a faint nod, lips curled politely but eyes hollow, because she knew the truth glittering inside her heart wasn't nearly as pretty as the jewelry adorning her skin. That night at dinner, everything looked perfect: the steaming dishes, the warm lighting, Joshua's casual teasing, Aunt Sun's delighted laughter. But perfection only made Sarah feel lonelier. Across the table, Joshua kept glancing at her, perhaps wondering why she looked more distant than usual, perhaps pretending not to notice the subtle tremble in her hand as she lifted her chopsticks. "Did you rest well at your parents'?" he asked gently, his eyes searching. Sarah smiled. Yes. That was all she said. The night continued like a beautifully rehearsed play, each person playing their role as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But when they returned home, the house felt a little too quiet. Joshua placed his keys on the shelf and went to shower, humming softly like he always did. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, pretending to read the news, but all she could see was the comment thread on that cursed post, the post that had cracked her world wide open. "And Elena, do you still love her?" The silence after that question screamed louder than anything. And yet the answer had always been there, even if unspoken. Sarah remembered the look in Joshua's eyes under that street lamp, the way his voice trembled when he told Selena, "I can't go on like this," and the way he held her after, gently, like she might shatter if he let go. She remembered it all. The way he used to hold her like that too. The way he used to smile at her, his whole face lighting up like dawn. But now there was something missing. Something neither of them dared to name. Later that night, as they lay side by side in bed, Joshua reached over and gently touched her hand. "Sarah, are you okay?" She turned to face him. "Of course. Just tired." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for taking care of Mom today." "She was very kind to me," she whispered. "Of course she was," Joshua said, his voice low. "She loves you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, wanting to ask, "Do you?" But she couldn't. Not tonight. Not with his face so close, his breath so warm. Instead, she whispered, "Good night," and rolled over, facing the wall. Her eyes stayed open for hours. In the following days, Joshua returned to work, and the days resumed their rhythm, familiar, predictable, peaceful on the surface. But beneath it, Sarah's heart was changing. Every time Joshua smiled at her, she searched for signs. Was it genuine? Or was it just habit? Every time her phone buzzed, she wondered if it might be another thread, another truth she had yet to uncover. And then it happened. She went to visit Joshua at work, bringing him lunch like she often did. But when she arrived, Daniel was standing at the elevator, looking nervous. He saw her and stepped forward. "Sarah, wait," the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and there they were, Joshua and Selena, stepping out side by side. Their expressions changed the instant they saw her. Selena's smile faltered, and Joshua's eyes widened. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" he asked quickly. Sarah didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on Selena's hand, which had just been touching his sleeve. A silence fell between the three of them, thick and choking. Daniel looked away. Selena took a small step back. And Joshua looked at her like a man caught in the middle of two storms, helpless to stop either from crashing. "Let's talk," Sarah said quietly, her voice as calm as a still lake. "Just you and me." Joshua nodded, swallowing hard. They went into his office. She placed the lunchbox on his desk untouched. "I saw you that night," she began. "In the garden. With her." Joshua's mouth parted slightly. He didn't deny it. Didn't pretend. That, somehow, made it worse. "Sarah," he began, but the words caught in his throat. She didn't cry.
Not this time.
I've loved you since we were kids, Joshua. And when you proposed, I thought I truly believed it was me you chose. Not by default. Not because she left. But because I was the one you wanted. Joshua closed his eyes. You are important to me. You are my wife. But you don't love me, she whispered. Not the way you love her. Joshua didn't answer. Silence, again, was the loudest confession. Sarah stood up, her voice trembling but clear. I don't want to live like this. I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their fallback plan. He reached out, but she stepped back.
Please don't, she said.
Not unless you mean it. And then she walked out, leaving behind the lunch, the silence, and the man she had loved for a decade. Joshua stared at the photo, then slowly lifted his gaze to Sarah, who stood beneath the lantern with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes full of a vulnerability he hadn't seen in years. The way the light fell on her, making her skin glow faintly, almost made him forget everything else: Selena, the hospital, the lies he had woven into the fabric of their life. Sarah's voice was low, almost a whisper, but it struck him harder than any shout ever could. You still don't get it, do you? She said, swaying slightly as the alcohol hummed in her blood. 10 years, Joshua. 10. Do you even know what that feels like? To love someone silently, to hide every heartbeat just so you can stay by their side? I used to count the days we spent together like prayers, thinking maybe if I was good enough, if I waited long enough, you'd finally turn around and see me. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry again. The tears had already dried on her cheeks, leaving behind only the exhaustion of a love too heavy to carry. Joshua opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Sarah, he began, but she flinched back, not in fear, but like someone pulling away from a burn they'd touched too many times before. Don't, she said quietly. Don't give me pity. She took a shaky breath, looked up at the sky, and tried to laugh, but it came out broken. You know what's funny? I used to think I was lucky. That out of all the girls in the world, you chose me. But you didn't. You settled. And I clung to a fantasy that was never real. Joshua felt like something inside him was shattering. He took a step toward her, then hesitated. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, she replied, her voice steady now. You hurt me every day you looked at her the way I wished you'd look at me. The silence between them was suffocating. The city buzzed around them, unaware of the quiet devastation unfolding under the streetlight. Eventually, he offered to drive her home.
She didn't protest.
In the car, they said nothing. The radio played something soft, some song about losing what you never truly had, and Sarah stared out the window, watching the lights blur past. When they reached the apartment, she didn't wait for him. She walked up on her own, unlocking the door, stepping into the stillness. Joshua followed behind silently. He didn't leave. He stood at the entrance, unsure of what to say. She stood in the hallway, one hand against the wall, steadying herself. You should go, she said without looking back. Sarah, I go. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Alone now, she sank to the floor, not crying, just breathing like someone who had run too far and finally stopped. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, warming her skin, but her bones still felt cold. She moved slowly, robotically, showering, dressing, making coffee she didn't drink. Joshua was already in the kitchen when she walked out. He greeted her with a smile, too practiced, too normal.
Morning.
I made you tea. She took it, nodded, said nothing. They sat together, two people in the same home but separated by an entire world of unsaid words. After a long pause, Joshua finally asked, Do you remember last night? She looked at him, eyes clear, voice even. Do you want me to? He didn't answer. She placed the cup down and stood. I'm going out. Where? To find something I lost. What? Myself. The door closed behind her before he could respond. She walked aimlessly for hours, through streets they used to walk together, past cafes where they used to laugh. She remembered a time when his eyes sparkled for her, or maybe she only imagined they did. By afternoon, she found herself at her parents' home. Her mother opened the door, surprised. "Sarah?" "I just wanted to visit," she said, smiling softly. Her mother pulled her into an embrace. No questions. No judgment. Just warmth. That evening, while lying in her old bed, surrounded by posters from her teenage years and stuffed animals that once knew all her secrets, Sarah let herself cry. Not for Joshua. Not for the past. But for the girl who had waited so patiently for a love that was never hers. When she returned to the apartment 2 days later, Joshua was there, sitting on the couch with the photo album open in his lap. Pictures of them smiles, vacations, birthdays, holidays. "I looked through everything," he said as she walked in. "Trying to find a moment where I looked at you the way I look at her." Sarah paused, heart clenching. "Did you find it?" He looked up at her.
No.
"But I found something else. I found all the ways you looked at me. Every photo, every smile. You were always looking at me like I was your world. And I never even saw it." She nodded. "I know. I'm sorry. I know that too." He stood up, walked toward her slowly. "Can we try again?" "Only if you can promise to love me the way I deserve," she said, voice strong, steady. "Not as a second choice. Not as a consolation. But as the only one." He hesitated. That pause too long, too heavy. Sarah smiled, finally, and stepped back. "Then I think we both know the answer." She turned, picked up her keys, and walked away, not as the girl next door, not as the placeholder in someone else's story, but as a woman finally ready to write her own. Joshua's phone kept vibrating on the nightstand, buzzing against the wood like a silent alarm no one wanted to answer. I stirred awake, groggy and confused, and before I could sit up fully, I saw him already out of bed, hurriedly pulling a jacket over his shoulders. The blue light of his phone screen illuminated his face, tense, hesitant, eyes flickering with conflict. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice hoarse from sleep. He paused for a moment, not looking at me. "It's work." Something urgent. That lie again. That carefully rehearsed line. I stared at his back, the curve of his shoulders, the subtle shift in his breathing, and I didn't ask further. Because I already knew. He left the room without another word. I didn't follow. I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence he left behind. My eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, but in my mind, I saw the image I'd seen so many times before: Joshua's figure under a streetlight, bent slightly forward as he whispered to Selena, holding her like she was the most fragile thing in the world. I curled under the blanket, pulling it up to my chin, and told myself to sleep. But my heart thudded louder than the ticking clock on the wall. When Joshua came home in the early hours, I pretended to be asleep. He moved quietly, almost guiltily, as if even the floorboards might betray him. He paused at the foot of the bed, watching me, maybe wondering if I was awake, maybe hoping I wasn't. Then he lay down beside me, and for the first time in a long time, there was a wall of silence between our bodies that no warmth could cross. Days passed, but the feeling didn't go away. Selena's presence grew like ivy, clinging to every quiet moment, wrapping itself around our daily lives. Joshua would smile. He would talk. He would cook my favorite dishes, but there was a hollowness behind his eyes I could no longer ignore. And two had grown too tired to keep pretending. One afternoon, I returned home early and found Joshua on the phone in the study. The door was slightly ajar. His voice was low, soft, like wind brushing over silk. "Don't call me this often," he was saying. "It's getting harder to explain." A pause.
Then, no, I didn't mean that.
"It's just I don't want to hurt her." And just like that, the last thread I'd held onto in my heart snapped. I didn't barge in. I didn't cry. I walked back to the living room, sat down on the couch, and stared at the blank TV screen until he came out minutes later, startled to see me. "Sarah," he said, voice too calm, too practiced. "You're back." I nodded. "Joshua, do you love me?" The question cut through the air like a blade. He blinked. Of course no, I interrupted. Not the way you say it. I want the truth. Do you love me like a man loves a woman, not like a friend he's known since childhood? Do you see me, Joshua? Do you even know what I like? What I dream of? Or do you just see someone who's safe? He stood frozen, lips parted, eyes full of panic. I don't want to lose you. That's not love, I said gently. That's fear. That night, I didn't sleep beside him. I curled up on the couch, my back turned to the bedroom door, and cried silently into a pillow until morning came. Joshua didn't speak of it. He didn't ask me to return. And I realized then we had both stopped fighting for this marriage. Or maybe we never really fought at all. The next weekend, I visited my mother. We had tea in the garden, and she watched me closely, as if she could see all the cracks beneath my skin. Sarah, she said, you don't have to pretend you're okay. You never did. I looked at her, and something inside me unraveled. I don't know who I am when I'm not waiting for him to love me. My mother took my hand. Then, maybe it's time you find out. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at the dining table with a pen and paper and wrote down all the things I used to love: baking, painting, old movies, cold mornings with hot cocoa. Things that had nothing to do with Joshua. Things that were mine. The next morning, I signed up for a pottery class. I booked a short solo trip to the mountains. And I stopped checking Joshua's phone when he wasn't looking. Because I didn't need to confirm what I already knew. I needed to move on from it. Joshua noticed. He noticed the change, the shift in my energy. He asked fewer questions, but watched more. Sometimes he would reach out to touch me and stop halfway. Sometimes he would say my name like it was a memory he was trying not to let go of. But I had already begun to let go. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally started loving myself more. Joshua and I walked into the apartment after the banquet, the laughter of the guests still echoing faintly in my ears like a fading performance. We looked the part, tonight the perfect couple, composed and admired, partners in name and presence. But behind the doors of our home, all that elegance crumbled like dry leaves underfoot. He removed his coat, glanced at me, and asked if I wanted tea. I declined. I was too tired, not from the party, but from pretending. Pretending that everything was still okay. Pretending that the gentle weight of his arm around my shoulder wasn't just muscle memory, a social reflex. Pretending I didn't see the way his eyes searched for someone who wasn't me when the music slowed down. I retreated into the guest room while he moved around in the kitchen, the clink of glasses and the whir of the kettle too loud in the silence between us. I sat on the bed for a long time, fully dressed, still wearing the earrings Aunt Sun had complimented me on earlier that evening. I remembered how she smiled, saying we looked like we'd been in love forever. I remember how I smiled back, a reflex honed over months of denial. I didn't even take off the earrings before lying down. I just stared at the ceiling, at the moving shadows, and thought of all the things I didn't say tonight. How I'd wanted to tell someone that the man who stood beside me in public was slowly slipping out of reach in private. How, even when Joshua touched my back gently as we moved through the crowd, I felt nothing but the chill of absence. I must have drifted off at some point, because I woke to the sound of the front door opening. It was nearly 2 a.m. Joshua was back, and with him came the faint scent of peach and sandalwood Selena's perfume. I didn't get up. I just listened. His steps were slow, hesitant, like he was trying not to wake me, unaware that I hadn't truly slept in weeks. The next morning, I made coffee for myself and ignored the extra cup he poured. He watched me across the table, the steam from his drink curling like the smoke of a word unspoken. Sarah, he said, his voice careful. You seemed quiet last night. Was I? I replied, my tone flat. I thought I was doing great. He flinched. Don't do that. Do what? Use sarcasm to hurt me. I looked up at him, finally. You've been hurting me for months, Joshua. If I get one jab in, I think I'm still losing. He said nothing. Later that day, while he was at work, I opened the closet and began sorting my things. Not packing. Not yet. Just sorting. I moved my winter clothes to the guest room. I boxed up my books and photo frames. I stood in front of our wedding photo and stared. My smile in the photo was radiant, full of hope. His was soft, uncertain, like a man walking into a fog. I took the frame down and wrapped it in newspaper. That evening, he came home early. I was sitting on the floor with bubble wrap and open boxes around me. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. "Organizing. Are you leaving?" "Not yet." "So there's still a chance?" "A chance for what?" "For us." I looked at him and tried to feel something. But there was only exhaustion. "Joshua, what are we even holding on to?" "Love," he said quickly. "Do you love me?" I asked. "Yes." "Then tell me what my favorite flower is." He blinked. "Sarah, tell me," I insisted. He opened his mouth, closed it. "Lavender." I laughed, not bitterly, but softly, like something inside me had finally given up. "It's not lavender. It's hydrangeas. You brought me a bouquet once. I said I loved them. You forgot." He sat down, his shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry." "You're always sorry." "Then what do you want from me?" I didn't hesitate. "Freedom." "From me?" "From this version of you that keeps pretending." We sat there in silence, the kind of silence that didn't feel like a pause, but a farewell. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. He left a note on the counter. "Going to clear my head. Please don't make any final decisions until I come back." But I already had. I spent the next few days clearing out the guest room. Not out of anger, but necessity. It became mine.
My space.
My air. I started sleeping better. I began walking more, journaling, drinking tea with honey instead of sugar. I even rearranged the kitchen cabinets. I found pieces of myself in the smallest routines: how I folded my laundry, how I played music when I cooked. One night, I found the photo album I'd hidden behind the bookshelf. There were pictures from college, from our first road trip, from the day we adopted a stray cat together that only stayed 3 days. I flipped through them slowly, stopping at one where we were standing in front of a lake, my hair blowing wildly in a wind, his hand on my shoulder. We looked happy. Or maybe we just looked young. I closed the album. The next morning, I sent him a message. "I've signed the papers. You don't have to rush back." His reply came an hour later. "I'll come back anyway, even if it's too late." I didn't respond. That afternoon, I booked a short trip to the countryside. A solo retreat. A space to breathe. The drive was quiet. The scenery outside the window changed from concrete and glass to trees and sky. I stayed in a little cabin with no Wi-Fi and a wooden stove. I read books. I wrote letters I never sent. I walked through fields with nothing but wind and silence for company. And I healed.
Slowly. Quietly.
Fully. On the last day of the retreat, I stood on a hill at sunrise and thought of him not with bitterness, but with acceptance. I had loved him for 10 years. I had waited. I had given. I had hoped. And now I had let go. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew it would be mine, and I looked at him under the soft yellow light at the restaurant entrance, his white shirt still stained with red wine, his eyes searching mine with a desperation he couldn't hide, but all I saw was a man too late, too torn, and too afraid of losing what he had taken for granted. He had shielded me from the wine bottle. He had said I was his wife in front of everyone, but it was not enough, not anymore. His apology fell into the cold air between us like a leaf fluttering onto frozen ground. "We'll try again tomorrow," he said, almost pleading. But I didn't respond. I turned my gaze away, watching the headlights of the approaching car. When it stopped, I opened the door and stepped in without a word, and as the car pulled away from the curb, I could still see him in the rearview mirror, standing there motionless, as if trying to hold onto something already slipping through his fingers. Back home, I removed my coat, sat in front of the mirror, and looked at myself for a long time. My reflection seemed unfamiliar, as if the woman in the glass had walked a long, cold road, shedding layer after layer of hope until only quiet resolve remained. I thought about the pink diamond necklace, the lavish dinner, the scene Selena had created, and the slap Joshua delivered. None of it felt romantic or even painful. It felt final. The next morning, Joshua knocked on my door. "Sarah, are you awake?" he asked gently. I made breakfast. I opened the door slowly, looked at him for a long time, and then said, "Joshua, let's stop trying." His eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "Let's stop pretending there's something here to fix. Let's stop pretending we don't know where this is going." "You're upset," he said quickly, "about last night, about Selena." "It's not about Selena," I cut in. "It's about us. You and me. We've been running in circles, Joshua. You say the right things, do the right things, but we both know the truth. I know where your heart goes when I'm not looking. And you know where mine no longer waits." His hands trembled slightly as he reached for me. "Sarah, please." I took a deep breath, then stepped aside, letting him into the room. I walked to my dresser and pulled out a folder. "These are the finalized papers. All they need is your signature." He stared at them, speechless. "I didn't give them to you before, because I still believed maybe things would change. But last night made me realize I no longer want to wait for you to become the man I thought you were." "You mean nothing I've done matters?" he asked, voice tight. "That I risked everything for you?" "You didn't risk everything," I replied calmly. "You tried to fix your image, your guilt. But love, Joshua, real love is not an apology. It's a choice. It's consistency. It's knowing someone's favorite flower and not letting another woman stand under the snow with you while I waited for a man who never came." Joshua dropped his gaze, staring at the floor. After a long pause, he said, "I never stopped loving you." I nodded slowly. "But you didn't know how to love me right. And that difference had made all the difference." That afternoon, I packed a suitcase and booked a hotel for a few days. I didn't want to leave with a fight. I wanted to leave with peace. I texted my boss to request time off. I needed space, not just from Joshua, but from everything tied to the version of myself that had settled too long. As I walked out of the apartment, Joshua didn't follow. He stood at the window, watching me go, and this time, I didn't look back. At the hotel, I turned off my phone. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the silence fill me like water seeping into a cracked glass. I cried, yes, but it was the kind of cry that felt cleansing, not collapsing. I wrote in my journal. I walked by the river. I drank bitter tea and thought about who I had been before this marriage, who I wanted to be after it. The world outside moved on, and so did I. A few days later, I returned to the apartment for the last time. Joshua wasn't home. I left the signed documents on the coffee table. I didn't write a letter. There was nothing left to say. As I closed the door behind me, the hallway light flickered once, then steadied. I took the elevator down with nothing in my hands but my purse and the necklace still in its velvet box. When I stepped out onto the street, the sky was pale and quiet, clouds stretched like whispers across the horizon. I walked away slowly, every step lighter than the one before, like the ground itself was helping me leave. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being alone. Because I wasn't broken. I was finally free. Joshua lay still on the hospital bed, the 4 drip ticking rhythmically by his side, his mind heavy not just with fever, but with the realization that the woman he had once taken for granted was now out of reach, in a way that was terrifyingly real. The nurse came in to change his dressing, her movements gentle and efficient, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was Sarah. Her eyes the last time they met, the way she looked at him without anger, without warmth, only with the hollow civility of someone who had learned not to care anymore. He remembered how she smiled when she told him their marriage was now only a calculation, and how even that smile had felt like a blade. At the time, he had tried to convince himself she was just bluffing, that she didn't mean it, that she was trying to hurt him because she was still in pain. But now, lying here, fever burning through his skin, throat raw from the dry air, he couldn't pretend anymore.
She meant it.
She had meant every word. Sarah had left him, not with shouting or slamming doors, but with quiet clarity and decisive steps, the kind of departure you don't come back from. He looked over at the small table beside him where the divorce papers still sat, and signed, untouched, but heavy as stone. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. Another from his mother. None from her. He picked it up slowly, stared at her name, still pinned to the top of his messages, and for a moment, he hovered his thumb over the call button, only to place the phone down again. What would he even say? That he missed her? That he was sorry? That he finally realized how deeply he had failed her? She already knew. The real question now was whether it made any difference. He thought of the years she had waited for him, of the countless little moments when she had bent herself around his silence, of all the smiles she had given even when her eyes betrayed exhaustion. He remembered the time she had stayed up all night nursing him through a cold, when he didn't even thank her properly. The way she had learned all his favorite meals and quietly avoided the things he didn't like. He thought of the time she waited in the snow, holding his gift, only to see him walk out of a building with someone else. He closed his eyes, guilt pressing on his chest like a weight he could no longer carry. Days passed. He recovered slowly, but the pain in his chest never left. He returned home alone. The apartment was colder, quieter, and unbearable. The scent of her was fading from the pillows. Her things were gone from the guest room. The living room felt hollow. Even the light seemed dimmer. He went back to work, trying to pretend life was normal. He smiled when spoken to, responded to emails, attended meetings. But at night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his hands resting on the empty space of the bed. He imagined her laughter echoing down the hallway, the sound of her footsteps, the way she used to hum while drying her hair. He missed everything. He missed even the silence they used to share because, at least in that silence, she was there.
And now she was not.
Meanwhile, Sarah's life was quietly blooming in the warmth of a different city, where no one knew her past, where she was no longer defined by her marriage, or her silence, or her sacrifices. She began working on a new project, throwing herself into the details with a focus she hadn't had in years. Her team admired her. Her clients respected her. And slowly, she started to laugh again, not the careful, polite laugh she used to practice, but something unguarded, unfiltered. She made new friends, went to new cafes, discovered she liked her coffee black, not with milk the way Joshua always drank it. She bought flowers for herself every weekend, hydrangeas, always. She attended an art class on a whim and painted terrible landscapes, but felt happy just to hold a brush again. Her heart didn't ache the way it used to. There were moments, yes, when she remembered his voice, or the way he kissed her forehead in the early days, and something inside her would twist a little. But those moments passed. They no longer consumed her. One afternoon, while walking through a park lined with plum blossoms, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. It was him. Just one sentence. "Sarah, I hope you're smiling wherever you are." She stared at the screen for a while, then locked it without replying. That evening, she sat on her balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sky shift from blue to violet. The stars began to appear one by one. She felt no urge to cry. No longing. Just a quiet sense of closure. That night, she wrote in her journal again. Not about Joshua, not anymore. She wrote about herself. About her future. About the way spring smelled in this new city. And about the way she had learned to love herself again, not as someone's wife, not as someone's consolation prize, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged steady, strong, and whole. In his apartment, Joshua sat in the kitchen, staring at the cup of ginger tea he had made out of habit. He thought about calling her again, but didn't. Instead, he opened his email and finally signed the divorce papers she had left behind. He scanned them, clicked send, and then sat back in his chair. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than ever, but for the first time, he didn't fight it. He let it wash over him, let the grief sit beside him like an old friend. He picked up the photo they had taken during that long-ago New Year's Eve and placed it inside a drawer. Not to forget, but to rest. As the city lights blinked outside his window, he whispered to the darkness, "I did love you. I just didn't know how." In another city, Sarah stood at her window, feeling the breeze on her face, her reflection superimposed over the lights beyond. And she smiled. Not because of him, but because of everything she had survived. And because the woman looking back at her was no longer waiting, she was moving forward. Joshua sat motionless in the dark, surrounded by silence so thick it seemed to press against his skin. Outside, life continued without pause, families returning home, lights flickering on, laughter spilling from open windows, but none of it reached him. He stared blankly at the empty sofa where Sarah used to curl up with a blanket, watching anime with eyes wide like a child's, smiling up at him whenever he passed by. Those moments felt like they belonged to another life. He got up slowly, each movement dragging like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly, but there was nothing inside except leftovers he didn't remember putting there. He closed it again, the silence snapping back into place like a rubber band. Every inch of this home reminded him of her. The slippers still tucked under the coffee table. The empty mug on the counter. The book she left open by the bed, its spine bent, a small crease marking the last page she read. Joshua reached for the mug and held it in both hands, as if it could still hold some warmth from her fingers. He didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the ache had long passed tears. It was dull now, a constant weight in his chest, something he carried without complaint, because he knew he deserved it. Days passed like that. He still sent her messages sometimes. Just short ones. Hope you're sleeping well. Drive safe. Let me know if you need anything. He didn't expect replies. Most of the time there were none. But once in a while, she would respond with a single word. Thanks.
Okay.
Noted. And he clung to those words like lifelines, because it meant she still saw him. Still acknowledged his presence in her world, even if only as a shadow. One evening, he walked past a store window and saw a reflection of himself. He barely recognized the man, looking back, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a suit that hung a little looser than it used to. He had aged in silence. He walked into that store, bought a bouquet of tulips, her favorite, and left them at her apartment door. No note. No message. Just flowers. When she came home, she didn't say anything about them. But the next day, when he passed by her door again, they were in a vase by the window, reaching for the sun. On the day of her company's product launch, Joshua stood in the back of the room, among the sea of strangers. He watched her take the stage, poised and radiant, her voice calm, confident. She had grown into someone remarkable, someone he had always believed she could be. When the applause erupted at the end, he clapped too, even though his hands stung. He left before she saw him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her every word, the curve of her smile, the way her eyes shone with pride. And he realized something he hadn't admitted until now: Sarah no longer needed him. She had found a version of herself that didn't revolve around his presence. And that was both beautiful and devastating. Weeks later, his mother called. She had heard rumors. Asked if they were getting a divorce. Joshua didn't know how to answer. He just said, "Sarah's doing well," and left it at that. When he hung up, he sat by the window and watched the rain fall, tiny rivers tracing paths down the glass. He remembered the first time Sarah told him she loved him, her voice barely a whisper in the snow, her hand shaking. He had hugged her then, told her he loved her too, and he meant it. But he didn't protect that love. He didn't treasure it when it mattered. Months slipped by. Their communication was mechanical, now shared documents, schedules, logistics. She still wore her ring. He noticed. But she never touched it anymore. One morning, she asked to meet. He agreed, heart thudding in his chest. They sat in the same cafe where she once confronted Selena, the air thick with old memories. She didn't order coffee. Just sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Joshua waited. Finally, she spoke. "I've been offered a position abroad. It's a big opportunity. I'm thinking of accepting it." The words hit him like a wave, yet he didn't flinch. He had seen this coming. "How long?" he asked, voice barely audible. "At least a year. Maybe more." He nodded. Congratulations. A pause. Do you want me to sign the papers before I leave? The question dangled between them like a blade. Joshua looked down at the table, tracing the grain of the wood. He wanted to beg her to stay, to tell her he'd change again, that he'd wait however long she needed. But he didn't. He looked up, met her eyes, and saw nothing but calm resolution. If that's what you want. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. They walked out together. The sun had just broken through the clouds. Outside, the world looked bright and untouched, like nothing had ever been broken. He held the door open for her. She smiled, faintly, a shadow of her old warmth. Take care, Joshua. And then she walked away. Joshua stood there long after she disappeared around the corner. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just stood there, a man who had finally understood that love wasn't enough, not when you failed to protect it. Not when you let silence grow where words once lived. At home, he opened the closet and found her scarf still hanging. He touched it once, then closed the door. In the quiet that followed, he whispered to no one, "I'm sorry." But apologies, like memories, were things you could not live in forever. Joshua felt like someone had plunged a dagger into his chest. He didn't know whether it was relief or deeper pain that surged through him when he read Sarah's reply. It's not like we're together, but he can go out and play with friends. That single sentence was like a gaping void. It said nothing, and yet it said everything. He couldn't stop imagining what would happen if one day she gave a different answer. If one day she decided to say yes to another man, if she smiled at someone else the way she used to smile at him. The thought made him nauseous. That night, Sarah came out of the bathroom wearing her usual home clothes, with her long hair slightly damp. Joshua was sitting on the couch pretending to read, but his eyes were blank. "You're still up?" she asked. He looked up, startled.
Yeah, just.
Couldn't sleep. Sarah nodded and walked past him, heading to the bedroom she now used alone. "Good night," she said without looking back. "Sarah," he blurted. She stopped. Her back was to him. The silence stretched. "That man from earlier," he began, trying to keep his tone casual. "Was he from your team?" She turned her head slightly. "Yes." "Do you like him?" Joshua didn't know where the courage came from. Sarah didn't answer immediately. "Good night, Joshua," she said softly, then closed the door behind her. The next day, he found himself aimlessly scrolling through Sarah's social media profile, looking at old pictures, videos, captions that once hinted at her affection for him. But those posts stopped 2 years ago. Everything after that had become more polished, more distant, like a professional facade. He realized he hadn't appeared in her life publicly for a very long time. The next week, Joshua was invited to a gathering with old friends. Sarah didn't go. When someone asked about her, he said she was busy with work. One of his friends, who had always been a bit too frank, laughed and said, "Man, if I were you, I'd never let that woman out of my sight. She's top-tier wife material. But be careful, women like her don't stay single for long once they fall out of love." Joshua's chest tightened. That night, he returned home early, only to find the house dark and quiet. He waited, but Sarah never came home. He called her. No answer. He sent a message. No reply. Hours passed. When the clock struck midnight, he finally heard the sound of the door. Sarah came in looking tired, carrying documents and her laptop. "Where were you?" he asked. "At the office," she replied curtly. "So late?"
Yes.
"There's a project deadline." "You should have told me." She glanced at him. "Do I need to report my schedule to you?" Her tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either.
Just.
Neutral. Joshua didn't know what to say. That night, he stood outside her room for a long time, his hand hovering near the door, but he never knocked. The next day, Sarah was invited to a seminar out of town. She didn't ask Joshua to go with her. She didn't even tell him directly. He found out from her assistant's message that she'd already left and would be back in 4 days. During those days, the house felt like a hotel room, sterile, meaningless, echoing with silence. Joshua looked at the wedding photo that still hung in the hallway. Sarah was smiling so brightly in it, leaning on him, her eyes full of love. He remembered that day. She had insisted on taking the picture outdoors because she said natural light made everything feel more real. It's important to keep it real, she had said. And now everything was shadows. When Sarah returned, she brought a souvenir for his parents. Not for him. When he asked her how the trip went, she answered like she was speaking to a colleague. It went well. I think the client was impressed. Did you have time to rest? A little. Did anyone go with you? The team. He nodded. There was nothing left to ask. One night, unable to sleep, he sat at the kitchen table and wrote a long letter to her. In it, he poured out everything: his regret, his love, his sorrow, his desperation. He folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and left it on her desk. The next day, the letter was gone. But she never mentioned it. Days turned into weeks. Sarah remained distant. Her phone rang often, and she would walk into the other room to take calls. One evening, as Joshua stood behind the half-closed door, he heard her say in a soft voice, "I'll think about it." The call ended. He didn't ask who it was. He didn't have the courage. That weekend, Joshua visited his mother. She took one look at him and sighed. "You're thinner," she said. "Is everything okay at home?" "It's fine," he lied. She poured him tea. "Don't take love for granted, son. Some women, once they give up, they never come back." He nodded. That night, he cried for the first time in years. Alone.
Silent.
Real. Joshua stood at the doorway, his eyes fixed on the figure walking away from him, one step at a time, never looking back. The sunlight filtered through the trees, painting long shadows on the pavement, but the warmth could no longer reach him. Sarah walked slowly, as if savoring the end of something heavy, yet never once hesitated. She didn't need to, because in her heart, the goodbye had been said a long time ago. It wasn't the kind of goodbye that came with shouting or tears. It was the kind that settles into the silence, quietly building up like dust until one day you can no longer breathe in the same room. Joshua stood still, like a man watching a piece of his soul slip away. He wanted to call out, but his voice no longer knew how to reach her. What would he say? Stay. Forgive me? I miss you.
None of it would matter now.
Love, once broken so deeply, doesn't echo anymore. Sarah was once the girl who smiled at his every glance, who followed him without complaint, who learned how to love by giving him everything she had. And he was the man who thought love would wait for him forever. He thought loyalty meant never letting go, but he had already let go the day he turned his back when she needed him most. She didn't leave because of one betrayal. She left because of 1,000 little moments where she felt alone while standing right next to him. Joshua always believed that as long as they didn't divorce, they still had time. But he didn't realize that staying married doesn't mean staying loved. He had hoped for a second chance, but when she stood before him, smiling gently with divorce papers in hand, he finally understood Sarah wasn't giving up. She was setting herself free. And that's what true strength looks like. Not anger, not revenge, but peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally choose yourself. When Sarah walked away, she didn't take her pain with her. She left it behind, folded neatly inside a memory. And in its place, she carried a new hope, a quiet courage, and the soft resilience of someone who once loved completely and survived. Joshua stayed behind, surrounded by a home full of ghosts. The sofa, where she once curled up watching anime. The scent of her favorite tea in the cupboard. The photos she no longer cared to frame. It was all still there, but it was only the echo of a woman who had already moved on. And in the end, he didn't stop her. Not because he didn't love her, but because he finally understood that love isn't about holding on when the other person is already gone. It's about letting go with dignity. Letting them go toward a future that no longer includes you. So he signed the papers. Gave her everything she asked for. And when she walked away without even shedding a tear, he knew he had given her the only thing he could offer her now. Freedom. Maybe that was love too, in its final form. Clapperboard, thank you for staying with us until the very end of the story. If you've ever been Sarah strong enough to walk away from someone you once loved deeply, or if you've ever been Joshua realizing too late the weight of a love taken for granted, then this story was meant for you. At Universe of Love and Anime, we tell stories that don't just entertain, they heal, they reflect, and they remind you that love is not just about finding someone. It's about finding yourself, even after you've been broken. So if this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because here, in our universe, every love story deserves to be told, even the ones that didn't end with happily ever after, but with strength, growth, and the quiet beauty of moving on. Milky Way Broken Heart Sparkles.